All the flowers we've looked at so far this season have flowers which are big enough to catch the casual eye. But most flowers are much smaller than this and require more in the way of attention from us. And a good example of that is ground ivy, whose blue-purple flowers are never more than a couple of tens of centimetres off the ground. But that is where much of the foraging activities of the insects that pollinate them are concentrated. And proportionally, the flowers are as big as the insects themselves, which see and smell them with senses that are attuned to the signals the flowers are sending out. This is the first example we've seen this year of a zygomorphic flower. Zygomorphic flowers which have evolved bilateral symmetry in order to exclude unwanted insects and control the movements of those which are invited, so that the chances of cross-pollination are maximised. And in this case, the invited visitors are mainly bees. With the camera or microscope or a simple hand lens, you can get a faint glimpse of the flower as the bee sees it. 5 ancestrally separate petals have been tailored in evolution's cutting room to a pattern that snugly corresponds to the bee's anatomy. The corolla is now a horn-like tube, flared at the front to form a landing area, above which there is a hood. The front part of the tube is a bee-sized chamber, but the entrance to the back half is narrowed by 2 doorposts, 3 to 4 millimetres apart, formed by the filaments of the stamens. Beyond this point, the visiting bee can only insert her tongue, which needs to be at least 15 millimetres long to reach the nectar at the tip of the corolla tube. The 2 pairs of stamens, one pair in front of the other, are positioned in the centre of the overarching hood, and above them is the bifid stigma, which stays behind the stamens until these have shed their pollen, and it has been carried away on the backs of the bees to be deposited on the stigmas of other flowers that are in the later female stage of development. After that, it curves forward to take up position right above the entrance. In other words, the flowers are protandrous. A chevaux de frise of stout crystalline hairs across the threshold makes it difficult for smaller insects to enter the chamber of the corolla tube, and a mat of prickly hairs coating the calyx of fused sepals keeps unwanted insects at bay before the flower opens. In fact, before opening, the flower bud has the appearance of a spiky gloved fist. Ground ivy is a member of the mint family, many of whose members have what are called essential oils. Essential oils are made from plant products and retain their distinctive fragrance and flavour. A lot of plant oils simply evaporate. And each species has its own distinctive essential oil, many of which we use for culinary purposes. For example, think of thyme, sage, mint, lavender, plants like that. And ground ivy has a very distinctive essential oil, very distinctive taste and a very distinctive smell. The taste is somewhat tonic-like, in fact. And it's not surprising that people looking at this plant assume that it had to be good for something. And in fact, the list of things for which ground ivy was thought to be good is amazing. It's hardly an exaggeration to say that it was thought to be able to cure almost anything from eye and ear infections at one end of the body to gout and sciatica at the other end, and a lot of things in between. But however effective or otherwise it might have been at treating your during the day ailment, your particular during the day ailment, you could be sure that when you sat down of an evening in the pub with your pint in front of you, ground ivy would be there to comfort you, because the preferred ingredient for imparting the distinctive bitter flavour to beer before the introduction of hops in the Middle Ages was ground ivy. An alternative vernacular name for which was alehoof.